Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso at thewatchbox.com. It's in the description below. It's your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any Watchbox platform. Reach out to me directly, tmosso at thewatchbox.com for pricing. Today, we're discussing the Omega Seamaster Diver 300M Chronograph in its original generation. It is the chronograph equivalent of the style often known as the first James Bond Seamaster from the 1990s, and this model debuted in 1993. It's 41.5 millimeters in stainless steel by 16.2 millimeters thick. From lug to lug, the case proper is 49 millimeters, and then if you include the solid end links, it is 54.4 millimeters with a 20 millimeter spacing between the lugs. Throwing it on my wrist, it wears like a bigger watch. I'd say, honestly, it wears more like a 43, and that's because of the thickness of the case and the distance from end link to end link. It is a substantial watch. If you're familiar with a 42 millimeter Royal Oak offshore, it's a lot like that, albeit on a bracelet. You can see it's not going to fit underneath a tight cuff, maybe a jacket, but definitely not a shirt. And you can see on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, I do have a little bit of clearance at the edge. I wouldn't necessarily wear this watch on a wrist smaller than 15 centimeters, however. It is solid and redoubtable. You can feel where the money went, as the timepiece just exudes a premium quality about it. It has a reassuring heft to every component. The bracelet was always an interesting piece in this generation because with a 5-link design and polished intermediates, as well as these rounded off shoulder links, it has the look of a robust dress watch bracelet. Now, it's solid enough to be a sports watch bracelet, and it is that, but it does have an elegance to it that, for example, the Rolex Oyster does not. You can see this is old school Omega bracelet tech, so the removable links are fixed with pins and sleeves, so if you want to size this at home, you're going to need a block and punch to do so. The clasp, which you can see is in very good condition. Note the depth of the engravings. They're still extremely sharp. The clasp was a revelation. Back when Rolex was building its tinsel-like stamped oyster clasps, Omega was machining from the solid, and this is still an impressive piece of work. It has a fold-out dive extension, which is milled from solid components, just like the clasp, and whereas the Rolex had a cheap clamshell lock, this has twin triggers, which feels expensive and price appropriate even today. Now, jumping back to the case itself, you can see that there's a helium escape valve. That allows helium that might enter during saturation diving to exit without blowing out the crystal or the seals. In order to enable that ability, you are going to have to screw it out and do so before the dive. So when the interior pressure exceeds exterior by 2 to 3 bar, this helium escape valve will release the helium from the interior of the watch with no ill effects to its structural integrity. A satin-finished mid-case, polished lug bevels. You can see it's the lyre-style lug case, well known to Omega fans. So you have that sort of inward twist and the outward twist at the end of the lugs. We have a screw-down crown with a crown guard, but what appear to be screw-down chronograph pushers are in fact just shouldered for stability and protection against shearing. You can see that I'm able to actuate the chronograph without actually screwing in or out the shoulders. They're fixed where they are, and the chronograph is always available. The bezel is an anodized aluminum insert in blue. Let's hear. It's grittier and more mechanical than, say, a Rolex bezel, but it's just as precise with 120 click action. Now you can line that luminescent pearl up with the skeletonized minute hand. The skeleton hands and the wave dial were signatures of this so-called James Bond watch. And again, James Bond wore the standard chronometer, but this is the style of that watch and the chronograph version. So these are often called the Bond hands. You have a 60-minute count-up timer if you read the minute hand against the bezel, which is handy because the chronograph only reads up to 30 minutes, so this might actually be the timing instrument you use more often. The original version of this watch, as you see here, would have featured a tritium dial. This came after the tritium dial, but before the applique indices, so you can see the features on the blue wave are printed, and then we have a lovely set of colors. We have white, we have key lime for the luminova, we have a dark blue for the dial base, and then we have a few well-chosen shocks of orange-red. You'll also note that there are polished chapter rings for each of the registers, an upscale touch that I didn't expect on a watch of this generation, but it is welcome. Solid case back, and underneath that, Omega caliber 1164. It's based on a Valjoux 7750, and it is a chronometer spec version. Unidirectional winding, automatic with a 44-hour power reserve. It has both a quick set and a stop seconds feature. It also uses a cam and lateral clutch chronograph that's incredibly well tuned and a pleasure to operate. The cam feel for the function selector really is quite sharp here. So like the Lamagna cam chronograph in the Moonwatch, this feels as sharp as any column wheel. The lateral clutch operation is also quite shock resistant, so it winds up being a very tough 25 joule movement. It beats away at 28,800 vibrations per hour. All of this is 300 meters water resistant with the Helium escape valve adjusted in 5 positions. Once again, it is a chronometer spec version of the 7750 in very high tune. Reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details. And we're back with the Diver 300 meter. You can see the entirety of those skeleton hands are loomed. The chronograph seconds hand is also loomed, and the bezel pearl is easy to spot.